Hello, everyone. Welcome to BrainMap. This seminar series is co-sponsored by the P41 Funded Center for Mesoscale Mapping, housed in the Martinos Center. It is our great pleasure today to have Dr. Capozzi, and Ethan will introduce the speaker to the audience.
Okay, great. Thanks, Chiyong, and thanks everyone for coming. I don't know if the Mac is working or it is working. Okay, great. All right. Well, it's my great pleasure to introduce the speaker today. Dr. Capozzi was trained in condensed matter physics and biophysics at the University of Pavia in Italy. He did his PhD work at EPFL in Lausanne, Switzerland, under Dr. Arnold Kamen, where he developed the ultraviolet light-induced radicals for dissolution dynamic nuclear polarization. He later joined the Technical University of Denmark as a postdoc in Young Argentier Larsen's group, further developing the UV-induced radicals to enhance hyperpolarization performance. And after the fellowship, he returned to Lausanne to establish his own independent research program on transportable dynamic DMP with 2 Swiss National Science Foundation grants. Dr. Capozzi is now a research and application manager at Polarize, which is the company that built our 2 DMP polarizers. And today he will give us a lecture on how to make hyperpolarized C13 nuclei transportable. Let's welcome Dr. Capozzi.
Thank you, Fan, for this very long introduction. Yes, so I'm very happy to be here. A little bit jet lagged, but let's see what I'll try to make it interesting. So, how to make hyperpolarization transportable? Few words about what I do at the moment. So, I work for Polarize. It's the company from which Ethan purchased some years ago 2 DMP polarizer. I'm in charge of the research and applications. We are in many places in the world, and our business is to sell polarizers. And today I will do something that is against the policy of the company, because I want to make hyperpolarization transportable. So basically, how to get rid of the polarizer and get only the contrast agent. So don't tell my boss that I'm giving this talk. So a few words first. You're familiar with MRI for sure. Maybe some in the audience not that much with hyperpolarized MRI. So few words about how and why hyperpolarization can be important. So MRI is great for imaging soft tissue, gives a contrast that is unmet, but for some pathologies, probably we can do it better, because morphological change. So when we do traditional MRI, we're after anatomical features, and sometimes for some pathologies, morphological changes happen a little bit too late. So currently, just to take an example, currently in Europe, if you're diagnosed with, this is a case for breast cancer, if you're diagnosed with breast cancer, and you enter a chemotherapy cycle, you get an MRI before starting and another MRI 3 months after, and then the radiologist will say, okay, the treatment is working or is not working, depending if the tumor is in recession or not. So this takes 3 months, and of course if the treatment is not the right one, is super bad for the patients, because side effects are not great, and also for the health system is a big burden, because then after 3 months you have to readjust, change the treatment, and start it over again. So the question is, can we do it better? So can we have a faster answer concerning the efficacy of our treatment or not? And the answer is yes. And to do that, instead of looking at the anatomical changes, we should look at the metabolism, because all these kind of disease, they start first at metabolic level, and cancer has a specific fingerprint. So the Warburg effect, it produces lactate even in presence of oxygen. So we can use this feature to see what is the stage of the cancer, if it is aggressive, non-aggressive, and whether or not the treatment is working. So instead of looking at the protons, and so being after an anatomical feature, we can look at metabolites in our body. And metabolites come with one very nice feature. So they are abundant in C13. So instead of doing proton MR, we can do C13 MR. That has the great advantage of having a very big chemical shift. So this distinguishing what is much easier compared to proton spectrum. It has no background, but the signal is super low because in water is in the range of 30 molar in the body. Metabolites are in the range of tens of millimolar. Moreover, the magnetic energy associated to carbon is lower compared to proton. All in all, let's say the time resolution at thermal equilibrium level is very poor. So you would do a lot of average to see something. So if we want to, so let's say that carbon 13 has a very specific fingerprint, can be very useful, but this fingerprint is very small. So to make it bigger, to increase the sensitivity, what we can do is to use hyperpolarization. So to create a state, a spin state that is of non-equilibrium, where in a certain way, there are different ways of doing hyperpolarization. At Polarize and during my career, I took care of dissolution DMP. That is one of those. So basically, we create this artificial state here. We try to push all the nuclear spin in one of the two. So this is a system with spin 1/2. We try to push all the nuclear spin either in the ground state or the excited state. The important thing is to increase as much as we can the spin difference between the two states to get signal. And in this way, we can gift MR with a frequency MR with a time resolution that is very high. So we can, if we inject a metabolite that is hyperpolarized, we can follow its fate in real time and follow the conversion and its downstream metabolism. So one technique to do hyperpolarization is dynamic nuclear polarization. And here we come more to the topic of the day. So at the end, I will cover two ways of making hyperpolarization transportable, but to better understand how to do that, first I will introduce a basic dissolution DMP experiments, then why it's not possible just to make it transportable using traditional sample, and then I will talk about the two main topic of the day, that is how to make the contrast agent transportable and how to make the polarizer transportable. So a little bit of basic knowledge on dissolution DMP. So to create the polarization, we ask electron spins for help. And the reason is that at experimental conditions that are pretty easy to achieve today, so low cryogenic temperature around 1 Kelvin and a magnetic field that is 3.7 Tesla, so in this range, while the carbon nuclei are still poorly polarized, the electrons are fully polarized because the magnetic energy associated to an electron spin ensemble is 2,400 times greater compared to carbon. So the electron spins will be our source of polarization, and to create this condition, so to polarize the electron first, we need a polarizer. So first of all, a DMP polarizer is a magnet with a cold environment to push our electrons in this state here. Then, of course, we have to prepare a sample in the right way. So we take a molecule with biological interest for the question we're trying to answer. So probably 90% of the studies of dissolution DMP in vivo are about pyruvic acid. So that's why here you see some molecules of pyruvic acid that surround a molecule of radical. So in this case, it's a trityl radical. So you mix your substance of interest in the molar range with radical in the millimolar range, and you embed everything in a glassing matrix. If you're interested, you can come later during the discussion why you cannot do good DMP with a crystal. So your sample has to be an amorphous solid. You load the sample into the polarizer here in the cold and into the magnetic field. You start shining microwaves on your sample. So the microwaves are the tool you need to transfer the polarization from the electron spin to the nuclear spin. And if you hook up an NMR spectrometer to your polarizer, you will see the signal of the pyruvic acid that starts increasing, and more or less after 1 hour, you are polarized. So you start by polarizing the molecules of pyruvic acid that has in close vicinity to the radical, because they are coupled by a super hyperfine interaction, and then the spin diffusion will diffuse the polarization to the bulk. Okay, so the sample now is polarized, is ready to be used to do preclinical, clinical applications, and the first thing you would think is to just take out your hyperpolarized sample and go close to your favorite scanner, melt the sample there, make it injectable, and do your hyperpolarized MR. But if you do that, the only thing you will get from the scanner is noise. And the reason is, and here we come to the problem statement, that the same interaction that allowed you to create the hyperpolarized state in the first place is the same interaction. So the coupling with the electrons is the same interaction that will destroy your hyperpolarization as soon as you're still in the solid state, but you try to take out the sample as a solid from the polarizer, and you travel through the low stray field of the polarizer. And the reason is that paramagnetic relaxation is pretty violent at the low field and is proportional to the concentration of your radical. So what will happen is that if you try to extract an hyperpolarized sample in the solid state from the polarizer, in few milliseconds, you will lose all the polarization you spent 1 hour to create. So that's the reason why in a very skilled team from Malmö, Sweden, in 2003, so more than 20 years ago now, introduced the dissolution step. So DMP per se is an old technique, but then the dissolution step was introduced to make this technique useful for biological applications. So what you do is to melt the sample inside the polarizer. So you introduce in a controlled way hot buffer into your polarizer, and you extract an hyperpolarized solution. So what happens is two things. So first of all, you dilute your sample. So you increase the distance between the nuclei and the radicals. That is good to slow down the relaxation. And most importantly, you switch from the solid state to the liquid state, and interactions in the liquid state are average because the molecules tumble, and this is much more forgiving when you travel through low field. So if you do that, then you have a high signal in your hyperpolarized solution. You can inject your patients and do hyperpolarized metabolic imaging. Here I report the let's say the iconic study from Nelson et al. From 2003, where they this was the first clinical study. So they injected prostate cancer patients at UCSF. But so do we really need a polarizer on site all the time? Can we do something about making the substrate transportable? This has been the focus of my research for the last 5, 6, 7 years, probably. And so the answer is yes. We can use molecules that, when are irradiated with UV light, they make radicals. So you basically you shine UV light on molecules of the belonging to the family of the alpha keto acids. What you do is that you excite a singlet state that then can decay in a triplet state. And from the triplet state, then this molecule can either relax completely to the ground state, doing some phosphorescence, so emitting light, or a radical reaction can be initiated. So basically, as far as you have this functional group, this decatone group, this OCO with OH here, all these molecules will produce radicals when they are irradiated with UV light. And to make these radicals stable, the radiation has to happen at low temperature. So what you do, instead of your persistent radicals, so the trityl, for instance, as I explained before, you replace the radical with one of these molecules that is a radical precursor. So you prepare your sample as explained before, you freeze it in liquid nitrogen, you shine UV light on it, and within few minutes, you can produce enough radical concentration to do efficient DMP, efficient hyperpolarization, but you have a big advantage. So when you expose your sample to a temperature that is above 200 Kelvin, these radicals will recombine in the magnetic species. So they will not be there anymore. Doing that, basically you get rid of the interaction that was bothering you when you were trying to extract your sample from the polarizer in the solid state. Over the years, we published a number of papers that explain how to do this procedure from nose to tail, basically. And this is how the irradiation setup looks like. So so here you see the maximum radical concentration as a function of the power. So the process is very greedy in power. So when you shine UV light at high power, so we're talking about 20, 40 watts per square centimeter, not only the radical generation becomes faster, but also the maximum inducible radical concentration increases. So it's a process of the second order. And too much concentrated samples are not the best solution because since the radicals are generated from the outside inside, if you put too much precursor, so for instance, just to give an example, a pure pyruvic acid sample is not the best choice for this kind of radical, because in that case, the radical would be focused on the outer shell and the DMP process would not be that effective. And you can see that when you build up the polarization of these compounds, because differently from standard sample that are characterized by a exponential buildup of the polarization, you see different components that depends on the distribution of the radical in the solid pellet. Nonetheless, the polarization works really well. So this is, for instance, here we try to polarize glucose sample using alpha-ketoglutarate acid as radical precursor. So the polarization is really good as far as you use microwave frequency modulation. So differently from traditional samples using trityl, here we don't use microwave radiation that is monochromatic, but we modulate the output. So instead of shining microwaves at a specific frequency, we sort of brush a broader range of frequencies, because differently from trityl, the relaxation time of this kind of radicals is much shorter. So increasing the excitation bandwidth, we improve the way the electrons transfer polarization to the nuclei. So for instance, here you can see the comparison between what happens to this kind of radical and to a traditional trityl radical. So you see that when you use monochromatic microwave radiation, the excitation is very slow, while it becomes faster when you use modulation. And for trityl, this is not needed because the radicals are the T1 of the radicals is so long that the depolarization of the electron spreads really fast. So the polarization values that you can achieve are high and competitive with trityl. So you can polarize glucose, pyruvic acid, alpha-ketoglutarate acid up to 50%. And then to make the sample long-lasting, so to freeze this polarization state, what you do is basically a dissolution without liquid. So what you do is you locally heat up the sample by blowing helium gas on top of the sample inside the polarizer. So we found this way easy to implement and safe enough. So you see here, so you polarize your sample, and this is whatever a sketch of how the sample cup looks like when the radicals are active. So your sample will have a color depending on what precursor you use. It can be more yellow or pink, because when you generate the radical, you modify the electronic cloud of your molecule, so they will get some color. And then you blow, so you raise by blowing helium gas, you increase the temperature of your sample here, and then you plunge back the vial into the liquid inside the NMR coil of the polarizer to assess losses. And you will see that your sample loses color because the radicals are not there anymore, and the polarization is locked. Once the polarization is locked, you can then extract the sample in the solid state, and everything goes well as far as you provide a little bit of magnetic field. So although the radical all the way from the polarizer to the transportation device. So although the radicals are not there, a little bit of magnetic field is needed, because the proton of your sample will be completely depolarized, and if the magnetic field to which the sample is exposed is too low, the carbon resonance will overlap with the proton one, and the proton will drain polarization from the carbon. So we have to keep them separated to keep the highest possible polarization from the carbon. So if you do that, everything goes well, and you can store your sample in a device that is more or less this big and try to do something with it. So I talked a lot is a sort of tedious experiment. So the best thing to understand what is going on is to watch a video. So this is me extracting the sample from the polarizer after quenching the radicals using helium gas. So I'm docking it to the transportation device, and this is a transportation device with NMR capability using permanent magnets, so I can make sure that I still have a lot of signal after the extraction. And after we're sure of that, we can just take a walk with the device. This is my colleague Matilda that is pushing this stroller into a car, because we decided to go far for the proof of principle. So we polarized the sample in Copenhagen, Denmark, and we drove to Aarhus. That is 5 hours drive, more or less. And so here we're in front of a spinal liner, but we're not using it. So there is my colleague, she took the appropriate solution from the small device, and she's injecting a rat. We decided to go to Aarhus because they're very proficient with hyperpolarized imaging. So the experiment was already very complicated. So I decided to play safe, at least for the imaging point of view. We go visit people that know what they're doing. And so we compared, so this was a perfusion, angiography and perfusion experiment. So we hyperpolarized urea in this case, and we injected a rat from a sample polarized on site, so with the spinal liner, what IFN has in the lab, and a second time with the contrast agent brought from Copenhagen. Of course, we lose polarization during all this procedure and the transport, but at the end the images are pretty similar. So in the sense that you can answer your biological question. Yes. 1 Tesla. 1 Tesla.
1 Tesla.
Yes. At the bottom is 1 Tesla, and then the magnetic rail to guide the sample in is yes. Yes. Yeah. The magnetic rail is in the order of 150 millitesla. We fill it with liquid helium. Yeah.
Is it hot?
No. It's a buff. Is a low boil off buff cryostat. So there are radiation shields to keep the consumption decent, but it's a buff cryostat. 1 liter. Yeah, there is 1 liter of liquid helium of liquid nitrogen. So you can, of course, if you want to go to the other side of Denmark, you need helium. But if you want to go across the building, you can use nitrogen. That's fine because your T1 will be 20-30 minutes, so it's good enough. Mikko Kettunen in Finland is trying that. So he has 1 polarizer and 3 scanners. He wants to service. So I made for him a smaller version. So it's just a nitrogen, and is enough to cross the road, sort of. Yeah.
So curious, you said that image is taken from Polarize in Korea.
Yeah.
What is the, can you remind me, what's the T1, solid state T1 of the
Is 24 hours
24
Yeah.
hours? Okay, so
after removing the radical, of course. Yeah.
and the pyruvate
Yeah.
will be 2 hours. It's a very short.
Pyruvate is shorter because you have a metal group that is not the best thing to have when you want to extend your T1 very much. Pardon?
Is that a deuterated molecule or just protein?
For the deuterated, we prolong the T1 quite a lot.
So the 2 hours is great.
The 2 hours is already deuterated, yes. For the protonated is 5 minutes.
What's the reason again? I'm just trying to. Pyruvate is so short and solid.
Well, you have tunneling of the metal group, although you are very low in temperature, but it will relax.
They tunnel, so
Yeah.
can't totally freeze out.
Yeah.
Short.
There are strategies to improve it. So there is this annealing feature that apparently kills the tunneling of the metal group, but it's a little bit like flipping a coin. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It depends how much you anneal and how it happened, etc., etc. So, but when you have a metal group, you have to deuterate. Otherwise, it's very, very challenging. For instance, glucose works beautifully. It stays there. It doesn't move. It doesn't relax. And yeah.
The other PMP would have to be free radical.
They are endogenous. They're endogenous precursors. Yeah.
Source of the.
Yes, is an endogenous.
So you inject.
Yeah, you inject also that. Yes.
And it's going to be the safety regulation for humans. So is going to be able to do like that.
Maybe. Maybe I'm not a good person to answer this.
That's definitely our interest.
Please.
Could there be other chemistry going on, just in terms of human safety?
So
Using very intense UV, aside from the radicals that you're focusing on.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So I know so we studied the breakdown products for the case of pyruvic acid. Then for the others is the same molecule with a little bit longer functional group. So the side products of the UV irradiation and quench for pyruvic acid are CO2 and acetic acid. That's it. Yes, so maybe I cover the last topic and then we can continue the discussion. So let's see how to make the polarizer transportable. So the truth is that I had a little bit of money left on the grant for the transport of the hyperpolarized compounds. And so I thought, okay, the cryostat is working, so the transportation device is working better than I thought. Let's try to put a waveguide inside this little thing and try to do some DMP directly there. And that's how it started, and we were happy about the results, as you will see. So when you want to make a polarizer transportable, the first thing you have to do is to get rid of the superconductive magnet. So we go easy. We use permanent magnet. So nowadays you can buy these Halbach arrays that are not that expensive and give a very decent homogeneity to do solid state NMR. So what we use is a 16 elements Halbach array to improve even more the homogeneity of the field. And we use samarium cobalt instead of neodymium because the behavior as a function of temperature is more predictable in the sense that you can do basically an infinite number of cycles of cooling, warming, and the resonance will not move. So for a given temperature, because these magnets drift with temperature, they follow the Curie law more or less. But for samarium cobalt, for a given temperature, we'll have a given resonance all the time. Neodymium, the magnetic domain, they behave a little bit crazy with temperature, and the field that you get at the end can change depending on the thermal cycle that you do. The device looks a little bit like this, so it's a little bigger trolley compared to what you saw in the video because we have more electronics. So we have an NMR spectrometer here at the bottom, the cryostat with microwave capabilities here, the microwave, so the PC to control everything is here, and the electronics, so the whatever, all the thermometers, helium level meter, and the microwave source is in here. So you can load relatively large sample for the size of the magnet. So for preclinical studies, it will be fine. So you can load up to 300 microliter of sample. You can work at 2 temperature, liquid helium, liquid nitrogen. It weighs 40 kilos in total, and this magnet safe. So we used material to go relatively close to the scanner without anything bad happening. That's a little bit the design. So this is the probe from which the magnet is hanged. So the 1 Tesla magnet hangs at the bottom of the probe. You can see here the rail, the magnetic rail to shelter the sample, in this case during the dissolution. You have the outer vacuum chamber and 2 radiation shields to decrease helium consumption, and the microwave radiation comes from the bottom. So we took inspiration a little bit from what people do in MISDMP. So we radiate from the bottom, and the magnet, the permanent magnet itself acts also as a microwave cavity. So it confines the microwave around the sample. Differently from a normal polarizer where the magnetic field is vertical, here is transversal. So we use just a simple solenoid for the detection instead of a Seidel coil. So these are the elements that I listed before. So there is the microwave radiation from the bottom. The dissolution uses the fluid path. So the dissolution is identical to the big polarizer, so to say. You can refill, if needed, you can refill the device while a sample is inside. And the holding time at nitrogen is 2 days. So it's 1.3 liters to be precise of cryogenic. So you can work for 2 days at nitrogen or for 10 hours at helium. So the big difference when you do DMP at these experimental conditions is that you go very fast. So differently, normally you need 1 hour to build up a lot of polarization. Here, of course, the polarization is lower because the theoretical bottleneck is the polarization of your electrons. And here maximum, it's around 15%. That is what you get at 1 Tesla and 4 Kelvin. But you go really fast. So this is proton polarization. So at 77 Kelvin, basically you are polarized after 3 seconds, and at 4 Kelvin you're polarized after 20 seconds. And that corresponds to almost 5% of proton polarization. So we, to show that we could do something with this polarization, we decided to do something very stupid, that is to do image of an hyperpolarized substrate done in a very small polarizer into a very big magnet, but that's what I had available at the moment. So the polarizer is 1 Tesla and the magnet is 14 Tesla. Doing it on low field MRI system would make much more sense, but I couldn't do it because I don't have any. But it was just to show, okay, we can do it. So, and we did a simple, whatever, gradient echo just to show that the polarization is high enough to be seen in real time. We can polarize also carbon directly. I was very happy when I could see carbon signal, because at the beginning I thought we will never see carbon signal, that's too low, but it works pretty well. Gadolinium doping of the sample has a very big effect, because the trityl T1, the trityl relaxation time at this low field is very long. And now we are starting, so we see decent signals. So now we are starting applications with carbon. So the idea is to streamline everything. So let's say benchtop polarizer, benchtop spectrometer to do cells experiment. So that's what we are after now. There is a lot to do in terms of optimization. What we get at the moment is 2.53% carbon polarization if we work after the solution, if we work at 4.2 Kelvin, but should be enough for cells. So that's what para-hydrogen started with for cells experiment. And the theoretical limit is higher, of course. We are now working towards optimizing the recipes and try to understand a little bit better the physics at these experimental conditions to increase the contrast we can get. So that was it, and thank you for your attention.